So, friends from all over Maryland Realtors, thank you again for coming to our weekly webinar series for Maryland Realtors. Today, we're talking about mediation, and I want to give you a few house cleaning rules so you know what to do. If you look at the bottom of the Zoom screen, you'll see a little box that says Q&A. Post your questions in there whenever you have the desire, whenever you have the need. If our presenter is saying something at a particular time, by all means, ask the question. Both I and Kathleen D'Artez, our moderator, will be monitoring these questions and will present them to our presenter at the most opportune time, depending on where we are in the presentation. So please ask your questions, and I'm sure this is going to be a lively and very wonderful discussion. This will be recorded so that you can access it later. And the slides that you see from Lisa Cameron will be available. So if you would like them, you can email me at communications@mdrealtor.org, and I will make sure you get the slides. One other thing I want to say is next week, our guest for our webinar series is Maryland Comptroller Peter Franchot. So make sure if you want to attend that one that you sign up again. It's a free registration, as all of them are. And with that, I would like to turn this over to our Director of Legal Affairs, who will introduce our speaker today, and that is Kathleen D'Artez. Kathleen.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. We are going to be talking about mediation. As Dan had kind of alluded to, Lisa has a slide deck. We're going to go through the content that we want to cover first. We'll try and feed questions in sort of following that structure, and then we're going to allow time at the end to discuss timely topics or any questions that might come in on the Q&A. So we're going to try and keep a little bit of focus so we make sure we get through the materials we want to cover first. So let me give you guys a little bit of background on Lisa. If you do not know Lisa Cameron already, shame on you. A lot of you who've been involved in the association or done ombuds training or anything already know Lisa. She's been a real friend to Maryland Realtors, helps us with strategic planning and all sorts of things. Lisa's background is almost exclusively negotiation and dispute resolution for a long time. Started out with working with unions and working with collective bargaining agreements for, I think it was the steel workers and engineers unions. That's a very strong background. You'd learn quickly there, I'm sure. Lisa, of course, has always been into training and schooling. She took all kinds of training programs in the state of Delaware and Maryland, I believe, right? Through the NLRB, National Labor Relations Board, Department of Labor's and various EEOC agencies as well. She also does negotiations and mediations with respect to employment matters as well. Lisa's formal training with mediation, she went to law school. Well, for a little while, Pepperdine University School of Law. She completed a course there, dispute resolution. That was in Malibu, California. And for Realtor World, since I think 1996, Lisa has been involved in resolving disputes for us, for Maryland Realtors, and the local boards. And Lisa actually created her own company, OM Mediation Services, and that is the administrator for our mediation program for the buyer-seller disputes, which is what we're going to be talking about today. The paragraph in the contract that requires the parties to go through mediation first. Lisa's the one who runs the show there. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Lisa. And thank you, Lisa, for joining us and for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Well, thank you very much, Kathleen, and thank you, Dan, for putting this together. And hello, my family of realtors out there. It's nice to be able to at least address you from this platform, this format. I do speak to quite a few of you on the telephone, and I don't always get a chance to see you. So now you get a chance to actually see me. But as Kathleen mentioned, I've been working with the Maryland Realtors Mediation Program since '96. I started out as just one of the mediators, but then the program flourished, it blossomed into the program that we have today, where we can do upwards to 300 cases per year. So it's not that, you know, people are just fighting just because they want to fight. It's because you all are very, very busy. And in doing the course of business, sometimes disputes pop up. So we'll want to just jump right into our slideshow. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen, and I think I know how to do this. I'm hoping I know how to do this because we keep going back and forth, and Dan was really good in showing me how to do this yesterday. Here we go. And I'm going to want it from the beginning. Okay. Is it when I'm going to do this to me again from the current slide? There we go. Does everybody get to see Kathleen? Can you see that now?
We can see, yes. Perfect.
Okay, great. Great. So the first slide, obviously, it talks about what is mediation. And of course, it's a neutral process. It's where you get an impartial party, a mediator, to work with the parties to help try to resolve the disputes. And a lot of times I get questions from people because they think that a mediator is going to pass judgment like an arbitrator or a judge would do. That's not what a mediator does. A mediator works with the parties to come up with some options, for resolution. If the parties decide that those options are viable for settlement, they can move ahead and move forward with a settlement. Mediation is non-adversarial. We don't come to mediation with our fists raised or anything like that. We come in with open minds, hopefully with open hearts, and not pass judgment on each other, but just focus on the problem and not the people, okay? The real big part of mediation is that it's self-determination by the parties, meaning it's their dispute, it is their decision to resolve it. Now, a lot of times mediators will come in with legal counsel, or they'll even invite their agent, and we're going to talk about that in a few slides ahead. But for the most part, when it comes down to making that final decision, it is in the hands of the parties. Who comes to mediation? Well, this is a buyer and seller, and they're parties to the mediation. And as Kathleen mentioned, we have paragraph 35 in our contract, which compels or obligates the parties to participate in mediation. They can elect to have legal counsel to represent them. And in some cases, they only have legal counsel to represent them. It could be in the estate sale. It could be that the party just, prefers to have the attorney rather, be their vocal point because they just don't feel comfortable in doing it themselves. We try to build up their comfort level, but that is their decision. Again, we never go against recommendations of legal counsel. If a party wants to have legal counsel, we welcome them with open arms. You can invite your agent to attend the mediation, but let's just be fair about this. You're not under any obligation to participate or attend. You are not a party to the contract. However, and I underscore however, if you have a good relationship with your clients and customers, talk to them about that. If they do want you to be there, know that you are just there to provide them with information from the file and what you did with them in the transaction. You are not there to be representing them in any legal capacity. That's one of the things that we look at through the Maryland Realtors Mediation Program is the risk reduction part of this. We do not want any of our realtor family members to get in the middle of any potential legal suit. So again, if an agent is invited to participate and attend, we do tell their clients and customers they're there by invitation and they are not obligated to be there. Oh, back up. Back up. Okay. Who needs to mediate? The buyer.
Oh, I was going to ask.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to ask one question just to clarify. If someone is going to have an attorney come with them to the mediation, who would pay that cost?
The parties pay their own legal fees.
Right.
The parties do. You can't expect, the other party to pay the other party's mediation fees. Each party pays their own fees, and that would remain the same for their legal counsel too.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. Again, paragraph 35 is really what drives the mediation process for the parties. It's within 1 year when the property was settled or when it's contracted to settle. I get asked that quite a bit because people will say, well, it's been past a year, and do I still need to go to mediation? Well, there is a question mark that could be raised, but I can just tell you this and share with you that the courts look at that obligation in the contract of a year to say, did you know about the dispute within that first year? And if you did know about that dispute within the first year, you should have been contacting the other party. You should have been engaging the other party into mediation. Anecdotally, there have been times where a party has just pulled the trigger before that year and gone straight away to court, and the court has kicked it back to mediation and has said, look, you are obligated by contract to try to work this out through mediation. And by the way, since you've now taken it to court, you now, whoever been sued with a lawsuit, must pay the other party's fees. So you don't want your clients and customers to get wrapped up into that little bit of a wrangling legal wise. If it ends up going, to mediation, you don't, lose your legal rights, okay? If it doesn't get resolved at mediation, you don't waive your legal rights. You still have the opportunity to take the matter to court. However, if you do come to an agreement, that agreement will be put in writing and it does become binding. Kathleen, one of the questions I get asked often is like, well, mediation isn't binding. So what's the purpose of going through mediation? Well, the mediation process is something in the contract that you're obligated to do, but you're not bound to come to an agreement through mediation. That's where that non-binding part comes in. However, again, if you do come to an agreement, it gets reduced to writing. Once it's in writing, it is now binding and it can be enforced by the courts.
Hey, Lisa, I have another question. I feel like I'm just going to ask about costs and money throughout this whole thing. I don't mean to be like that, but I do have a question about that. If the parties
Sure.
go through the mediation process and they do have a written agreement and the one party, let's say one party is supposed to pay money to the other party, that party does not pay money. So the other party has to go to court to try and, collect the money. Is there anything in your written agreement about attorney fees?
Usually in those agreements that's established between the parties at mediation, if somebody should breach that, I believe there it is put in there that, they would be seeking redress on those associated legal fees to, enforce the mediated settlement.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
It does. Actually, I would have expected that, yes. If they don't do what they're supposed to do and I have to bring you to court, then you're going to have to pay my attorney fees. That's
right. And I think I might be able to count on one finger where we've actually had somebody that breached an agreement and did not pay. And I think the circumstances were that the party that needed to pay did make the payment, and when they mailed it in, I guess it was a priority post, red, white, and blue envelope, and the recipient party, somebody picked it up at the house, thought it was junk mail, and threw it away. And the payment was, I believe, in a money order. And in those situations, I think it takes like 6 months, in a money order. If you have to, stop that money order and ask for it to be redone, it almost takes 6 months. So I think there was only one occasion where we actually ran into a snag like that.
good.
All right. Why mediate? Well, it saves time, and especially now during this virus. And I hope none of our family members have been affected by that virus, but it's hard not to be affected even if you haven't come down with the virus. One of our predicaments now is scheduling mediations because our facilities are not equipped to host mediations with safe distancing. So we will be Zooming. We're into that Zooming moment, the video teleconferencing moment. So we will be, expediting the cases we already have on board for scheduling, but all the new cases coming in will easily be segued over for, mediation by video teleconferencing. So that's going to be a great savings. And it's my understanding that even if you want to file suit today in Maryland courts, the first time physically, a person like myself that is not a court-related personnel, I won't have an opportunity to walk in a courthouse until October 20th. So that is a consideration for a lot of people. Let's try to get these things resolved early, even before we think about opening up the courts. Saving money. Yeah, mediation definitely is going to cost the parties money, but it's not going to cost nearly as much as it would be if you had to, ensue a formal lawsuit where you had to hire an attorney, or even go through the process of having depositions and interrogatories and all those nasty things that are associated with the administration of justice in the civil courts. It can range anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000 to file what we would normally refer to as a simple lawsuit. So the cost of mediation, I have a screen set aside for that, but each party pays their own fees. It's a $200 admin on each side, and then there's a $200 to $250 mediator fee on each side. So cost is less than $500 per party. So that is definitely a savings than what you would pay in a litigated lawsuit. Saving reputations. And it doesn't sound important on the surface, but it does run deep, meaning that no consumer or buyer wants their personal business publicized. And in mediation, it's all confidential, meaning that it's not going to be reported. There's not going to be anything that the world at large would hear about the outcome of mediation, because that's part of our process. Anything that we talk about in mediation, any documents that we have rendered through mediation, go under confidentiality. The other thing about saving reputations or even saving face, and I'll just give an example. Let's say you're a high profile contractor, or maybe you're somebody that does a lot of renovations, and you have a problem with a party that purchased one of your homes and they're not happy with some of the work that was done on it or whatever. Well, the last thing that that contractor or maybe that renovator would like is to have a lawsuit, to have it at large in public consumption that somebody is suing them, for damages. And the old saying goes, if you say something nice about somebody, they'll tell somebody else. But if you do somebody wrong, they'll tell everybody. So saving reputation is really a key part of the mediation process too.
Actually, Lisa, can I just jump in with one little housekeeping issue? I think some people are raising their hands to ask questions, and we have kind of a decent crowd. We can't really see everybody. So I would ask everybody to please use the Q&A function to ask any questions that you have, and that'll make it easier for Dan and I to review the questions and make sure that they get answered. All right. Sorry about that. Thanks. Back to you, Lisa.
No, that's fine. I'm glad to hear it. Bring those questions in, people. We'll attend to them. The next slide. What type of disputes can be mediated? Well, property condition or post-settlement disputes are definitely something we mediate all the time. It's usually regarding the non-disclosure by a seller, meaning that something wasn't reported on the disclosure form, or the new buyer submits that the previous owner did not disclose something. Pre-settlement issues that cannot be resolved through broker negotiations. We don't get a lot of these, but this is one of the ones that we have to be absolutely sure that the negotiations have broken down between the brokers and the parties want to go ahead and try to get it resolved through mediation. Because the last thing that we do not want to do is we do not want to interfere between the negotiations that the brokers are submitting on behalf of their clients and customers. Okay. And the last one is the deposit disputes or the post-escrow disputes. And I say that they're the worst kind of dispute to have, because you're dealing with a finite number. You're dealing with, somebody couldn't close on a property, they couldn't get their mortgage, whatever the circumstances are. A lot of times they're lower dollar amounts, like maybe under $2,000. And really, by the time you go through that process as a consumer and you spend the money, it seems like it would have been a better idea if they could have just sat down and tried to work it out prior to having to go to mediation. Now, on the post-escrow, sometimes that becomes a little bit finicky too, because there might have been something that they had agreed upon to said, look, after 30 days, you're going to reimburse me back for the cost of this electricity. Again, you're dealing with a finite number. By the time you add up the cost that you might be spending on mediation, you might want to have reconsidered and said, we should have done this ourselves instead of spending the money. So that's why I call it the worst kind of dispute to have.
Lisa, that's crazy talk. You're talking yourself out of a job.
I know. Well, and you know what? A lot of times I tell consumers when I talk to them, and I give them tips to try to get it resolved before they file the papers. And I always say to them, it will never insult me if you say, Lisa, I hope I never have to speak to you again. That to me is a compliment. That to me means that they're working towards resolution and they don't need us, for that purpose. So yeah, if I lose a case or two or three or four, I'm okay with that.
Understood.
Where are the mediations held? Well, we are Zooming. As a result of this virus, we are very limited in what we're able to do with the scheduling at our facilities. Even though we have some facilities that have very large conference rooms, they still are limiting the time that you can have people in the facility because you still have to have staff available. And, once you have a room that might be 20 by 40, you might be able to put like 4 to 6 people in there and safely social distance them. So Zooming is the way we're going, and so far so good. We're making our way. We're getting people a lot more comfortable with the process. Okay, I keep seeing something up on the screen about moving something away, and I don't know why it's doing that. Dan, can you hear me about this? Is that showing up on the screen?
It just disappeared. So
Yep,
It is,
it's
but
coming back.
I would keep going because it disappears, and
Okay,
it will
I
not
just
be
hope
on the
that the part
slides that I share with people, I guarantee you.
Okay, how long will the mediation last? We schedule for 2 hours, which allows each party, ample opportunity to present, discuss their positions. Additional time can be arranged, but honestly, there's a lot that can be taken up in 2 hours time. And now with the advent of video conferencing, we find that we can just launch right ahead into the discussions, because prior to the video conference, my office administratively gets a lot of that fast forward paperwork taken care of and out of the way, so the parties can just jump right in and start talking about what their differences are with the mediator. So 2 hours is an ample amount of time, but if there's an offer to extend it and the mediators up for that and the other parties up for that, it can be done. But for the most part, we get a lot done in 2 hours. How much does it cost? Here we go. It's a $200 admin fee for each party, and it's a $200 to $250 mediator fee for each party. And the reason there's a range, after July 1st, mediator fees are going up. I'm not charging anymore. I'm keeping my $200 at the same level, but the mediator fee is going to be going up to $250 an hour. So if anybody files a case for mediation prior to July 1st, that mediator fee would be $200. After July 1st, they're going to be told it's a $250 mediator fee. But the average cost is $450 per party. So again, if you relate that to what it might cost you for to go after somebody legally through the courts, it's about 1/3 of the cost if you certainly had to hire an attorney.
hey, Lisa, it's Kathleen again. I really am asking about money all the time today. I don't know. I was just going to ask, pre-COVID-19, I guess someone would print out the paperwork and complete it and send it in with a check. Has that changed with COVID-19? Are people paying with credit cards online, or how would somebody pay for filing?
Yeah, they pay by check, money order, or credit card. They send the paperwork in, or they email it in if they're paying by credit card. One of the things that I'm having to learn to do and to launch administratively is like online forms. I'm kind of iffy about the online payment thing, only because I'm old school, but it's probably going to be coming into play where they'll be able to pay for that administrative fee online. And then of course mediators will be able to take credit cards by either PayPal, Venmo, LawPay. They have a variety. Each mediator has their own way of collecting their fees. So yeah, the forms are online right now. They can download them. They're in PDF. They can send them to me. A lot of times they'll send me the forms and they'll say, the check's in the mail. And I'll say, okay, when I get the check in the mail, we'll start your processing. But everybody's usually good on their word because they want to get the process started. So that's really what we've been doing, and it's worked so well so far.
Good.
Let me one thing. If somebody initiates mediation, they paid their $200 admin fee. What happens if the other party doesn't respond? That's usually a big question, and it's a good question because we can't make somebody respond. I mean, it's not like we have subpoena power in the mediation program. However, if after 30 days, and we rush hard in 30 days, we send out a certified letter to the responding party asking them to get back to my office in 15 days to talk about responding to the mediation process. If I don't hear from them in 15 days, I send out another letter giving them their 30-day deadline, or what we call your drop dead date. If they don't respond by that time, my office then has the ability to close up shop, meaning that they will give the requesting party a statement of compliance that they fulfilled their obligation by contract to pursue mediation, and that the other party has failed to respond. We'll give them the documentation and verification that we reached out in a legal way by, certified mail, and also that we gave them the correct amount of time to respond. So, in about, it used to be a higher number. It used to be almost about 1/3 of the cases people didn't respond. And when I closed up shop, the other party obviously would take them to court. Court will sanction those non-responsive parties. And not that I know that 100% because I'm not the attorney that goes in there, but what I understand is if a judge looks at a case and knows that it should have gone to mediation, they'll look at that defendant and think, wow, you didn't even comply with a very simple term of this agreement. Whatever argument you bring in your defense is going to fall on deaf ears. And by the way, now you got to pay the other party's fee that they had to pay for mediation. So that's not a good thing for a respondent or a defendant to do.
Hey, Lisa, there was one question that came in sort of asking for some clarification on the fee, asking if the fee was per hour or a flat fee. Could you just maybe explain the fee again to make sure people understand that?
Yeah, it is a little confusing sometimes. I look at it as a flat fee. You're going to be getting 2 hours with the mediator, and the mediator's cost is $200 per hour. So if there's 2 hours and it's a $400 mediator fee, it's split by the party. So one party pays $200, the other party pays $200. So there's your flat fee moment. So you really aren't, sometimes people think, well, it's $200 an hour. Each person is paying that mediator $200 an hour, and now it's like $800. No, each party pays $200 admin fee and a $200 or $250 mediator fee.
If there was some marathon mediation, let's just suppose the mediation was going to last 4 hours or 6 hours, the meter basically would be running. Right?
Well, yeah, and what happens is it ends up going to the close of that 2 hours and the parties decide that they want to continue. We have in our payment information that the mediator will say to them, okay, you know that the next hour we're going to be charging you incrementally. And I believe that the mediators will charge you incrementally 15 minutes. So it's 15 minutes out of whatever their fee would be. So, it's a quarter, let's say. At $200. So for each 15 minutes, you're spending what, $50?
Gotcha. Okay.
Right? Okay. So let's see, next slide. All right. Administrative process to request. Parties that initiate mediation must fully complete the requesting party forms. They need to include their admin fee and provide the requisite documentation to verify a contract between the parties. And it sounds silly, but I do ask for documentation that there is a contract between the parties, because not all of our realtors use our Maryland Realtors contract that has mediation in there. Some of them are using maybe a regional contract, and it doesn't have that in the contract specifically to mediate. So I need to always verify that there is a contract that is the Maryland Realtors contract that has mediation. That's number one. But number two, I want to make sure that that party that's requesting mediation actually had a contract with that other party. Because there have been times where I've received, documentation and it doesn't match the requesting party forms. So I, put these forms under a pretty swift microscope to look and make sure that if we're going to be reaching out on that party's behalf, I want to come out of the gate knowing that I'm hitting the right person and asking the right person to respond to mediation. So yes, we ask for that documentation and verification. Parties that respond to mediation they need to complete their responding party form. They will be given those forms when we reach out to them by certified mail, because I automatically set them up for their own forms. And then they have a 30-day deadline to get back to OM services so we can go ahead and schedule the mediation conference.
Okay.
And just a quick FYI on a response, a lot of times they'll ask me, well, should I write anything or what should I say? We have a checkoff box that says you can just say, I'm the responding party, I don't have anything to respond at this moment. Or you can send in whatever you feel is a response in writing back to the other party. But that in no way means that, either side is going to, be able to influence the mediator once they get the paperwork. It's just going to be a little bit of an idea from the mediator's viewpoint about where the parties are in their perspectives.
Lisa, just as a general question, from the time that someone files a request for mediation, what would you say is sort of the general timeline? The other party would have 30 days, I guess, to respond, and then it would have to be scheduled, and then there's going to have to be a hearing. What would you say from start to finish, assuming a successful mediation, what would you say roughly? I know it's a toss-up now with COVID-19, but in general.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, prior to COVID-19, we could get things done sometimes as quickly as 45 days from start to finish, up to 60 days. But obviously with COVID-19, we've had to kind of like stall everything, and it's a good thing you can't see my desktop for all the cases that need to go into video conferencing now. But yes, even when we embark on that fast forward video conferencing, I would perceive that we'll be able to have from start to finish, from the time somebody files for mediation, the other party responds in 30 days, we should clearly have that scheduled within the next 30 days. So less than 60 days, we should have you in and out of the process.
All right, thank you.
Great. What to do, who to call. For my realtor family members, if you're contacted by a client or customer who's seeking resolution to a dispute, inform them to read their contract before they seek litigation, okay? Most of the attorneys that, we have been working with and in the state of Maryland are very familiar with our contract, and they will tell their clients, hey, you got mediation first, let me help you out in that capacity, or give me a call if you don't work your way through that process. So, but that's something for our realtor members need to know. Refer them, to seek legal counsel. That's a good thing. But if they say they're going to file a court case, just kind of, raise your hand up and say, well, read the contract first. You don't want to make a misstep. Okay. Have the client or customer contact the service provider, OM services. I'm ready for the calls. I'm handling those calls. I love taking those calls, and I'll walk that party through. And a lot of times I tell the realtors when I talk to them, pass on my number to your client or your customer, have them call me directly. I will walk them through the mediation process. I'll be able to answer their questions more succinctly than if I have to pass it through the realtor to them. And we do have a website at mediate.com/MDRealtors that does have our program pamphlet and our rules on it that gives them a little bit more information, but it's always beneficial for them to give me a call so we can talk about things.
All right.
And here it is. Here's my contact information. Again, we have a toll-free voice. There's my direct email. There's our website. So I'm just a phone call away or an email away.
All right, so we were going to allow some time at the end to kind of go through some questions that we had received, and also some kind of general questions, I guess, that we do a legal hotline, and we receive a lot of questions about. Basically, a lot of them end up where we suggest to people that they look into mediation, or suggest that the clients might want to look into mediation. Let me just ask one kind of a question that came in. It was a little bit, I guess, a little bit unexpected, maybe. The person who's watching now or participating now asked if agents can mediate against other agents.
Yeah. Hey, before we do that, can I do the stop share so we can take it off the screen?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. That's.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Hey, we're back.
I'll come back. Okay, there.
Yes. Your question was again, I'm sorry.
The question was from one of the participants, I guess, one of the
Oh, about agents.
agent
Agents, yeah, broker to broker.
kind of disputes.
Yes, and we're not going over that right now. We're talking about the buyer seller, but yes, there is an absolute opportunity to mediate amongst yourselves. Obviously, if you have a commission dispute and it needs to go to the board for arbitration, because that's a requirement that we have within our code of ethics, that we're going to keep all of our disputes in-house. And some of the boards will automatically set you up for mediation because they'll say before we even launch or embark upon a formal process like arbitration, we're going to want you to sit down and mediate first. Not all the boards have taken that position yet. They may end up doing it that way. But yes, we are definitely working with brokers, agents on the commission disputes. And the process will vary from board to board how we get it set up. But it is, yeah, something that we're going to be doing. We'll be doing it by Zoom. So that's how our members will be able, and we'll probably be able to put it together very quickly.
Right. So for that, I would suggest probably a first step would be talk to your broker or your office manager. Pretty much, honestly, for almost every dispute or every issue that comes up, your first step should be to talk to your broker or your office manager. And for an agent-to-agent dispute, it's quite possible that the best place for you, where you're going to end up, would be with your local board, and you could still do mediation through that process as well. This is real. What we're really talking about today is the disputes between buyer and seller pursuant to the contract. That's primarily what we're talking about today.
Right, and maybe we can do another webinar once we get everything put together with the boards about video teleconferencing, because I know some of the professional standards people have been calling me and asking me, what are you, can we do this? Can we work with you to do this? Yeah, absolutely. We just haven't, tied all those, ribbons together yet. But you did bring up something which I would really highly recommend to anybody that's listening in today. If one of your clients or customers has a dispute and it is requested mediation, and you get a letter or a notification that you were a listed or named agent, that doesn't mean that you're named in the dispute. It just means that they want to keep you in the loop on the information level. If you should receive anything like that, I would encourage you to talk to your manager or your broker that you've received that. Not everybody gives us that information. We're kind of hard pressed to find all the information, who the managers and brokers are. Sometimes the consumers don't even know who their agent really is. But if you should happen to receive anything from the mediation program about a client or a customer seeking mediation, talk to your broker or manager about it. Give them a little earshot on that, just to let them know that this is something in the background. It doesn't mean there's a problem about the agent, but we just want to make sure for risk reduction that they know about it.
Right. I was just going to say, just in general, I think there's, whether the agent wants to attend the mediation, I think there's, like everything, there's advantages and disadvantages to that. And you had already touched on this. Really, the agent cannot provide legal advice to the client. So if that's what they want you there for, then that's not appropriate. That's not your role. You cannot, by law, that would be the unauthorized practice of law. You cannot give them legal advice. If you give them advice and they don't win, or they don't get as much as they think they're going to get, they're going to be angry. They might be angry at you. You certainly don't want to put yourself in that kind of situation. But I think, Lisa, when you and I had chatted earlier, and you had mentioned something, maybe if the agent has maybe a teeny bit of liability, or maybe could have done something differently, and feels like, well, if I participate with this mediation, maybe we can kind of make this issue go away, then that might be something where it would make sense to attend the mediation and participate in the mediation. So again, the recourse, or the best course of action, would be to talk to your office manager and broker and kind of weigh those pros and cons and make the right decision.
Correct. And again, I just follow up with, we don't go into mediation with an eye on the agent and say, we're going to put you under a white hot spotlight and ask you where you were the night of the murder. That is not what we're there for. We want the agents to be, part of the solution and not part of the problem. And I have to tell you that consumers, as much as we love our consumers, it's like the mafia. They try to draw you into their problems for their bad decision making. And I'll just give you, for instance, and maybe some of our listeners out there will be nodding their heads like, oh, that happened to me. Deposit dispute. If I had a penny for every time I took a telephone call from a consumer that said, that broker won't give me back my money, that agent is holding on to my money, my immediate response is, oh, I don't think the agent or the broker is doing anything with your money except keeping it into their escrow account, which they're obligated to do. They're regulated to do that. So the consumers sometimes feel that just because the other party might have defaulted or whatever, that you have the opportunity just to write the check out directly to them and that's the end of it. We all know that that is not the end of it, that you are regulated by law, that you cannot do anything without mutual, releases from the party. And if you can't get that, then they have to follow the next steps. A lot of times I'll get people that will say, well, the broker didn't write the letter, or the broker didn't file for an action of interpleader. That's when I have to remind them that that's an election for the broker to do that. It doesn't mean that the broker has to do that. And a lot of times a broker will look at the situation and say, well, the line's already been drawn in the sand. I don't need to write that letter because that's wasting another 30 days for the other party just to reject it anyway. So if you're listening out there on those deposit disputes, just make sure that if the consumer has a question about those regulations, that you remind them that it's in an escrow account.
I would just chime in and basically just add a little bit to what you had said. That's a pretty frequent question on the legal hotline. If the transaction has fallen apart for whatever reason, generally, and I don't know, even just condo or HOA documents, something that's pretty easy and pretty straightforward. And for whatever reason, the parties by that point, there's a little bit of hostility between the parties. The seller's mad, the buyer's not going forward. The buyer's mad that the seller's a jerk. Whatever it is, by law, if the buyer terminates timely under those conditions, the buyer would be entitled to get their EMD back. But the way the Brokers Act is written, the broker can't release the deposit unless there's something signed by both parties agreeing to that. So that's sometimes where this stuff falls apart. Even if one party under the contract should be entitled to return of the EMD, the broker may not be able to release it. And that's, we'll get questions on a legal hotline about that. And that's when we refer them to Lisa and suggest that the parties go through mediation. I think generally, there may be some misunderstanding about that. They don't really understand that they don't get it automatically. And again, the same thing you had said too, I think with the 30-day letter as well, that may not make sense for the broker. It might be a dual agency situation. Maybe the broker represents the buyer and the seller. That might not be something that, as a company policy, maybe they don't do 30-day letters in those kind of situations. So there's a number of reasons why it could end up in mediation. The thing that on the legal hotline that I have started pointing out to people when they call is to let them know what the cost is for mediation. And it's like Lisa pointed out, it's definitely cheaper than going to court, but each party is going to have to pay a $200 filing fee. Each party is going to have to pay $200 or $250 to the mediator. So if you have $1,000 EMD and the parties are going to fight about it, if they're going to go through mediation, each party is going to be out of pocket $400, $450. If it's possible to give the other party $399.99, $100, $200, if the other party will go away for any amount less than that, it really makes economic sense to do it. I mean, Lisa, you know this too. The parties are agitated each other. They're mad. That guy's a jerk. I'm not giving him a penny. If you as the agent can kind of calm them down a little bit and get them to think about the bottom line, it really, in those situations, it really is advantageous to give the other party a little bit of money and make it go away. Your client will still come out ahead financially. Even though they don't want to give the other person a penny, it probably makes more sense for them to do that.
Right. And I know for our realtor members, it's a difficult conversation. Number one, the contract has just fallen through. Everybody's disappointed. The buyer's disappointed, the seller's disappointed, but that disappointment should not convey over to the actions of the agents where they take a posture or stand and say, well, my seller deserves this and my buyer deserves this. I mean, you might want to feel that internally, but the moment that you really reflect that to your client or customer, you've now put them at odds right away at not trying to get it resolved. So I would recommend that you just kind of pull yourself back and go, this is something that we really don't want to have happen, but if the other party is not into agreement, here's your next options, and just be frank with them about what the options are. And a lot of times the client will say, well, don't you feel that they should give the money back? well, I'm not an attorney, I'm not a judge, and I can't make those legal pronouncements, but I can just say this: it's always better to try to get things resolved before you have to go to mediation or court. Again, I would just caution our realtor members that, a lot of times our consumers, they want you to, stand up tall for them, and you're more than willing to do that for them, but not in this capacity, not in a legal capacity to say that, hey, you should win and that person should lose, because now you're just setting yourself up for scrutiny.
Right. Right. I was hoping you'd have a little bit of time, Lisa, to talk about what kinds of disputes you're seeing now. I think this is another thing we had chatted about a little bit before the call.
Right.
On the local hotline as well. There's sort of our trends or hot topics, and I just wanted to see what type of disputes you guys were seeing now or recently.
Right. And even though I say flatly the deposit disputes kind of run in waves depending on what's going on in the marketplace. And for instances, during a time where, let's say, first-time buyers are trying to go out and, find a house, they find a house, but the new program or money program is just dried up and they can't get their financing. Now they have a deposit dispute. Makes sense that if they can't get the financing because the program's dried up, hey, try something else. If they can't, they should get their money back, right? Though it doesn't happen that way. But now we're in a new wave again of escalation clauses where people are paying more for a property than what it's listed for because they want to secure their place on that property. And in doing so, a lot of times they will issue a home inspection just because they want to be in first place and don't want to muddy the waters on the contract. They want that house. Well, that's great if you get the house and you now paid an extra $10,000. They settle on the house. Now they find out they've got some real property conditions, or they put money aside, for something like that. Now we really have a problem on that escrow. So that's another thing we're running into, especially with escalation clauses.
So people who have not had home inspections performed after settlement, they're surprised by some property condition item? Okay.
Yeah, that. Or what happens, let's say they pay the extra $10,000 and they're getting ready to go to settlement, but they didn't put into the agreement that they were going to have a home inspection, but they just elect to have somebody come over and take a look. Now they find out they do have some problems and they kind of want to pull back on that contract. Well, you can't do that. You've already agreed. You put it in writing. This is the way contracts work. So there's that surprise moment when the seller's saying, well, heck, you're not getting the deposit back. You've already agreed to this. And then the buyer's saying, well, I was willing to pay you $10,000 more. And what's the seller respond? Well, I had 2 other offers that I could have taken. So it just keeps rolling from there. But yeah, we're seeing an increase in problems with escalation clauses. Another one, more on a property condition level, are solar panels. So for all my friends that are working with properties that are being conveyed with solar leases or solar sales of the equipment, make sure you have all those little conveyance documents put together, that you've gotten them from the solar provider, because they seem to be very problematic in mediation, and I can't imagine how problematic they're going to be when they go to court. But we have mediated a couple of them, but honestly, they're really tough Nellies to go through. A lot of unknown.
What do you have any sort of practical suggestions if, say, someone who's listening now, if they represent a buyer who just moved into a home, and now 2 weeks later, after they move in, they find, I don't know, mold or, something that was hidden before, they discover something new. What would be your suggestions for them as far as like documentation and all that sort of thing? Practical tips.
Yeah. Well, practical tips. A lot of times, they'll ask me, should I get it repaired? Well, I can't say, adamantly, yes, you should. It depends on the gravity of the problem you're having with the property. If it's a structural thing and the integrity of the structure is going to be jeopardized, you definitely need to have something looked into. If it creates a health problem like mold or lead paint or whatever the circumstances might be at that level, definitely get that addressed, because your health is number one. But that being said, documentation is your best friend. If you have somebody coming out making an assessment, a professional, get somebody who is certified, who has the credentials to do that, and ask them to make the assessment of how long this condition has been at this property. A lot of times mold remediation, when they start ripping away at the walls and they look behind the drywall and then see the studs, they'll be able to tell whether that problem has been there for the last 6 months, 2 years. You know, they can tell whether it's happened just now, whether it was just a water intrusion. But yeah, with mold, there's definitely a timeline that's attached behind that drywall. So that's really what you would want them to do. And again, you really don't want to start doing any kind of cosmetic work on a property until you've had somebody that has the valid credentials to make an assessment that this was a problem that you had before you started replacing the carpet or, you know, replacing drywall. Because sometimes sellers will come back and said, well, you just wanted to change out the carpet. You just wanted to change the molding. You didn't like what we had before. Well, it could very well be that you didn't like the carpet before, but if it was moldy, you certainly don't want it in your house. So again, documentation is your best friend.
I would just actually, just as you were speaking, one thought did occur to me. We were talking about what the role of the agent would be, whether they should attend the mediation or not attend the mediation. I just was thinking documentation might be a good role for the agent. If something came up after the home inspection, maybe there was some discussion back and forth about some particular issue, and then it was dropped, or the buyer decided they weren't going to push it. They didn't really care too much about it. If the buyer then files for mediation, if the agent on the listing side has emails back and forth, oh, the buyer decided they don't care about this or whatever, that might be something that would be a suitable role for the agent, maybe to make sure their client is prepared with documentation,
Yes.
you know, and then could provide that documentation for the client so the client could move forward and have all the relevant documents right in front of them.
Yep, absolutely. That's the best foot forward for our agents, just to share with their client what information transactionally that they prepared and they assisted them with. You know, that's their best foot forward. You know, that's how they can assist their client.
What other topics or hot topics or trends are you seeing?
It goes all through the gamut, but you know, and just looking at my sheets before, you know, I started up here and trying to see how many cases that we pulled in this year or whatever. Some of a lot of the larger counties obviously are going to get more claims because there's a lot more business that's being done. But you know, mold is a very big thing, you know, where people have either had some kind of leaky roof or a leaky basement and they've made repairs and they feel that everything's fine. We're now living here. We're not seeing any problems, but the problem really didn't go away. And then you rely on that, maybe that home inspector that really didn't do the best job that they had or should have done. And, you know, now the consumer is at, you know, risk because of that. So it kind of like puts the agent and the home inspector off into their own corner. And sometimes the consumer will then say to me, well, they picked the home inspector, they picked this person for me, they picked that person for me. So there's a cautionary tale too. Even though you're recommending people that you know are credentialed or certified, sometimes those parties will ring in their ears, but you told me to use, you know, this person, or this was my instruction, I had to use this person. My response to them is, you know, as long as the person that you worked with certified and credentialed, they should be good. Make sure that they still are holding those credentials. But, you know, the agent doesn't necessarily need to take any responsibility for the actions of the home inspector or a certified contractor. All they're doing is making that, here's the list of people that we know are certified or credentialed.
Right.
That's one part of it. The other part of it, what we're coming into now, hello, air conditioning. Can anybody see my fuzzy hair? It's air conditioning moment. These are the claims we're getting today. My AC isn't working. When I bought the house, the inspection, it was not warm enough that we could test the AC. So, you know, basically the inspection was limited into the scope. Well, now that it's hot enough to turn it on, it's not working. And the previous owner is going, hey, you lost your time on this one. I'm not taking care of it. So that becomes a little bit problematic. One thing I will add into this, because a lot of times agents are brought into it at this level, when you are working with a seller and now that seller is being asked to respond to a mediation request, that seller has now moved on to greener pastures, maybe a new state, new country, wherever. That requesting party is going to want to know, how do I get in touch with that seller? And sometimes we'll have that information, the seller has made it available or it has been available by some record, but sometimes it isn't, and it's in the hands of that listing broker. And maybe that listing broker does not feel that they should be the one to share that information, or they've been told by their seller not to share that information. The problem that I see with that one is they're putting you in front of the bus, meaning that if we don't have a bona fide address to send that information to, the best that we can offer that consumer is sending that information to the last known point of contact, and that's that listing broker. So there have been many times where I picked up the telephone and I've called that agent or broker and say, is there any way that you can get your client to call me directly so we can talk about this? Because I do not want any of our family members in front of the bus.
Gotcha. Hey, actually, the question came in, Lisa, let me ask you, you've been so inspiring that one question has come in about someone who wants to be a mediator. If somebody who's watching now wants to become a mediator, what's just we're kind of close to the edge here time-wise, but just a brief overview. What does that process involve and how do they get experience?
Right. Well, and thank you for asking, and I'm glad that somebody's interested in the mediation field. You're probably already doing an awful lot of mediating. People in the real estate community, we mediate every single day, whether it's with our kids or our family and friends, our consumers, we're mediating. Right now, on a physical level, it's hard to be able to refer you to any program that's going to be offering mediation training. My recommendation would be to go online and Google Maryland Mediation Online Training. There's a lady in Baltimore Mediation. Her name is Louise Senth, and she has been in the mediation field for a very long time. And I believe that she might be offering some online instruction to become a mediator. But the process itself is most times you go and take a 40-hour basic mediation training course. And there you learn all the different, off the scale of, not resolving it all the way to resolving it. So you'll learn, the different processes, but you'll focus on mediation and learn how to work with people and crosstalk and learning the benefits of confidentiality and being a neutral. Sometimes it's difficult, not to take a side or an opinion. Even as a mediator, we have to set ourselves at zero and paint that slate from there. But, again, I would look to any online courses that might be offered or check in with either the University of Maryland School of Law. Sometimes they're offering, mediation training. Now, Kathleen mentioned I took mine as well as a lot of our other mediators through the Pepperdine School of Law, the Strauss Institute. They did an on-site training 20 some years ago to get us all started. And then I went out to Malibu and finished up and went for my advanced training there. That is an excellent school. And sometimes they will come in and work with either the University of Maryland or the University of Baltimore. Is it the Carey School of Law? Is there a Carey School of Law?
Yes.
Yeah, Pepperdine sometimes will buddy up with them. So there's some, opportunities probably that'll be coming this way, but I don't know that they're advertising them this moment. But, do a Google search and you'll be able to find that. But once you become, let's say, trained in mediation, by the book, let's say, or by instruction, the real work begins in the process. So my next recommendation is every single county has a community mediation center, and you can volunteer. I'm a volunteer for the one in mine up in Cecil County, and I'll help with court mediations. And that's another way of getting some experience in using the district court as your platform to launch into mediation and doing some consumer disputes with them. From there, if you wanted to be a mediator in our group, we do have a threshold that you have had to be mediating for a little bit of time. You had to have at least 10 cases under your belt as a solo mediator. So it might take you a little bit, several months, if not up to a year, to get to that point. But once you do, you're Zooming with the rest of us.
That's great. Thanks. I think we're at the end of our time here. Deb Hudson submitted a question just for a point of clarification in case it wasn't clear to everybody. Commission disputes or disputes about money do not go through this process. Any kind of commission dispute, if you think you're the procuring cause and you should have received the commission, that's going to go through your local board. You're going to make a request for arbitration through your local board. And again, talk to your broker or office manager is the first step in that process as well. If that was not clear to anybody, I apologize for that. And thank you, Deb. That should be clear. That was a good point there.
Right.
Dan, are we at the end here?
You've done well. I think this has been a very informative hour. Somebody did ask, what is the range of income for a mediator? I don't know if you want to just...
I'm poor.
Selling it.
It all depends. Yeah. The mediators that are on our roster, they're not looking at this for their sole income, because for the numbers of mediators that we have and the numbers of cases that are being mediated, they're not going to, base this on their sole income. This is just an added income to them.
Side hustle.
If you wanted to get into so your little side hustle, right? Now, there are some people that are in the field of mediation outside of the real estate community, myself included, that I do mediations for the Postal Service, and we're on contract. And I still even say that for the cases that I do with the Postal Service, it would not be my full living. I don't get that many cases exclusively from the Postal Service that would, pay all my bills during the year. So unless you're really into mediation full time, full throttle, and you've got several different contracts, you're going to be doing a little bit of a side hustle. Now, in some respects, it's one of the best additions to your resume to go through the mediation training, because I can't tell you how many people have said to me, I don't want to be a mediator, but I want to learn more about the process because it improved what they did at their day job. So again, for our realtor family members, you guys are already in that negotiation mode. Mediation would be a segue for you to learn how to manage the negotiations more than be part of the negotiations as a mediator.
That's a good insight.
Well, thank you. And Kathleen, thank you for hosting this. You've done a wonderful job. And Lisa, thank you for really presenting all this information in such a efficient and engaging manner. I think it's been a wonderful hour. This event has been recorded. We will be posting it later on our website and sharing it on our YouTube channel. Like I said at the beginning, if anybody would like a copy of Lisa's slide deck, email me at communications@mdrealtor.org, and I will be happy to get those to you. So,
Actually, I'm going to throw in one more thing. I'm going to throw one more thing in real quick. Lisa has some FAQs for doing mediations by Zoom, and I looked at that before the class. That's really good information as well. If anybody wants that, I suggest have that. We could make that available to people as well. However we do that, I'm not sure you know the mechanics of that better than I do, Dan, but that's really good information, you guys, and I'd encourage you to look at that and share that with your clients as well, because obviously that's the way we're going to be going, at least for the short term.
Kathleen, if you forward that to me, I will make sure to add it to her slide deck as one document, and so that people can have both.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan.
Well, thank you all, and thank you for visiting us again this week, and we will all see you next week with the Fran Show. Have a good day and have a good coming weekend. Bye now.
Thanks. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.